First puzzle, the threats are queen takes rook, queen takes bishop, rook takes rook. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to e3, queen to d6, rook takes bishop, queen takes queen, rook takes queen. One more, here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. The checks are rook to a3, check, rook to e2, check. Answer to this puzzle is b3, rook to c6, check, king to b5. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. The checks are queen to h7, check, queen to h8, check. The puzzle is solved using g6, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, rook to f4, queen to h7, check. Next, puzzle position vulnerabilities are queen takes pawn, check. The checks are queen takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is queen takes pawn, check, king to a3, bishop to e7, check, before bishop to g5. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are there are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is bishop to e3, queen to e5, bishop takes bishop, queen takes pawn, check, bishop to g2. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Rook takes rook, check, queen takes bishop, check, queen takes pawn, check. The checks are rook takes rook, check, queen to h2, check, queen takes bishop, check, queen to f2, check, queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is bishop to b7, rook takes rook, check, rook takes rook, queen to e2, bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, queen to e1, check. Next, the threats are rook takes bishop, queen takes pawn, bishop takes knight. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to g5, check, bishop to d4, check. The best move in puzzle position is rook takes bishop, rook takes rook, bishop to d4, check, king to g2, bishop takes rook. One more, puzzle position vulnerabilities are knight takes pawn, check, knight takes pawn, queen takes pawn, rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are knight to e6, check, knight takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is knight takes pawn, check, rook takes knight, rook takes pawn, queen takes rook, queen takes queen, check. Another one, the threats are rook takes bishop, knight takes rook, knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using knight takes rook, queen takes knight, rook takes bishop, queen takes pawn, rook to f8. Next puzzle, puzzle position vulnerabilities are rook takes pawn. Checks in puzzle position are g2, check, rook to h2, check, rook to d1, check. The answer is rook to h2, check, king to g1, rook to d1, check, rook to e1, rook takes rook, checkmate. One more, here are threats in puzzle position. King takes rook, king takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The answer is king takes rook, b5, king to f5, c4, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, king to e4, king to e6, king to d4, king to f5, a4, king to e6, king takes pawn. One more, the threats are rook takes pawn, rook takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. a2, check, rook to d1, check, rook to b3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook to d1, check, bishop to c1, a2, check, king to b2, knight to d3, check. Another puzzle, threats in puzzle position are bishop takes bishop, knight takes knight. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is bishop takes bishop, king takes bishop, knight to f5, check, king to h8, queen to h6. Another one. Here are the threats. Rook takes knight check. Pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop check. Queen takes queen check. Queen takes knight check. The checks are: rook takes knight check. Queen takes bishop check. Queen to f2 check. Queen takes queen check. Queen takes knight check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook takes knight check. Bishop takes rook. Queen takes bishop check. King to g1. Queen to g4 check. Another one. Threats in this position are: knight takes bishop. Queen takes queen. Queen takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. Checks in puzzle position are: knight to d8 check. Knight to h8 check. Knight to h6 check. Knight to g5 check. Knight to e5 check. Knight to d6 check. The puzzle is solved using: queen takes queen. Bishop takes queen. Knight to d8 check. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are: queen takes pawn check. Rook takes rook. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Queen to f5. Queen to c8. Rook takes rook check. Queen takes rook. Queen takes bishop. One more. Here are the threats. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: queen to h6. Knight to g1. Queen to h2. Bishop to d5. Knight takes bishop. Let's continue. Here are the threats. Pawn takes rook check. Checks in this position are: pawn takes rook check. The answer is: pawn takes rook check. King to d8. Rook to c4. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to d4 check. Bishop to c5 check. The best move in puzzle position is: bishop takes knight. Queen takes bishop. Queen to d4 check. King to h1. Queen takes bishop. Another puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: there are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Solution to the puzzle is: h5, h4, g4, a6, king to d4. Another puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Rook takes knight. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn check. Queen takes pawn check. Queen takes rook check. Queen takes pawn. The checks are: queen takes pawn check. Queen to h2 check. Queen takes pawn check. Queen takes rook check. The puzzle is solved using: rook takes knight. Pawn takes rook. Bishop to d6. Next, here are the threats. Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn check. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes bishop. King takes bishop. Queen takes pawn check. Queen takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Bishop to e6 check. Bishop takes pawn check. Queen takes pawn check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight takes pawn. Queen to f7. Bishop to e6. King to h8. Bishop takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes rook check. The checks are: queen to b4 check. Rook takes rook check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to b4 check. Knight to c5. Queen takes knight check. Queen takes queen. Rook takes rook check. King takes rook. Pawn takes queen. a5. b4. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Let's continue. Threats in puzzle position are: bishop takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn check. Rook takes pawn. Checks in this position are: bishop takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is: bishop takes pawn check. King takes bishop. Knight to g5 check. One more. The threats are: knight takes pawn. Bishop takes bishop. Bishop takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: rook to h7. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Rook takes queen. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.